Welcome to the House of Strange in a series we call Fireside Storytime, a show dedicated to sharing scary, bizarre, paranormal, and just plain unexplainable stories with you all. Before we jump into tonight's story, artwork for this episode is kindly provided by our friend Julia Bruno. Look in the description below for her contact information if you're interested in taking a look at more of her artwork. Also, if you or anyone you know has a scary, unexplainable, or bizarre story to share and are willing to share it with us, our email will be down below as well. You may also follow us on Instagram and send us a direct message there. And if you wish to remain anonymous, let us know. With that said, let's get started. Tonight's episode opens up with our friend Alma, who's had some paranormal experiences at her home. She was also kind enough to share them with us tonight through Instagram's direct messages. She writes, "My dog is scared of my room, like dogs are scared of thunder, especially at night. My abuelita on my dad's side passed away recently, and I kept thinking of her on a couple of nights after her death, and on one particular and ordinary night, something strange happened to me that happened to stick to me like glue. This night felt like any other night. I was thinking of my abuelita and the wonderful times we spent together. The room was cold and the air felt light. Silence blanketed the area as if devoid of life. I felt in some ways isolated. Time kept ticking away and the night grew shorter and shorter, when eventually the clock struck 3 a.m. Silence continued to fill the room as my dog slept in the corner of my bed, and a certain stillness was felt in the air, when someone or something cracked my door slightly open. Just enough that I could make out what appeared to be a dark figure. This dark figure appeared to be in the shape of a woman. I'm sure of it as I could make out the silhouette of hair against the darkness that was in the hallway outside my door. This figure began whispering, 'Isa, Isa, Isa.' The whispers flowed through the air so effortlessly to my ears, and this name, Isa, the figure whispered, was coincidentally my family nickname. The figure continued to whisper the name, but I didn't feel at all threatened by the presence of this figure. Eventually, the figure began to fade away as I began to slowly go back to sleep. The next morning, I asked my family if anyone had come into my room last night, and they all answered no. Could this have been the spirit of Alma's grandmother coming into her room for a visit? Let us know what you think in the comments section down below. This next story is another paranormal experience our friend Alma is sharing with us. Her story begins on an ordinary morning like today's. The time was about 6 a.m. The sun was beginning to rise, and slowly it began to get brighter outside, as the light was starting to enter my room. It was still and silent, as all mornings are. I hadn't dreamt of a serial killer, a man, in quite some time, but this morning was different. In this dream, the serial killer appeared on the screen of my television. The black mirror-like reflection of my television reflected my room, but in the middle of the screen was the man I didn't recognize. He began to approach the screen in a fast walking motion as he reached for the edge of the television. He pulled himself through the TV set and into my room, stepping over the frame one leg at a time, ducking his head under the top of my TV, and right as he was going to make it out completely, I awoke in a panic. My eyes opened up fast and I was struggling to catch my breath as I awoke from this nightmare. Unaware of what was happening, I was laying on my side, and it was at this moment that I began to feel something or someone push me off my bed. I clearly remember feeling two distinct sets of hands push my back as I lay awake on my bed feeling terrified and trying to make out what I had just experienced. I was struggling to figure out whether I was still dreaming or not. The next day, I had woken up with bruises on my arm. There's this attic panel right outside my room, and on a windy day, the panel lifted, exposing what was on the other side. I could see frames and boxes, but I refused to go up there or let anyone go in there and to open anything, especially after what happened to me in my room. And I want to thank Alma for sharing her experiences with us, and personally through secondhand experience, I know what it's like to live in a haunted house, but those are going to be stories for another episode. This next story comes to us from the r/paranormal subreddit by a user called Wolfstar24, who shares a scary childhood experience that they had, and the story starts off like this. Hey all, after watching a show about the paranormal recently, I was reminded again of a childhood experience that I can't explain, and that made me absolutely terrified, almost to the point of a phobia of dogs. I'll just point out as well that 1, we did not own a dog at the time, and 2, I mentioned this to my mom not that long ago, and she said she remembers this night too, and that I wasn't dreaming when I ran downstairs to her. I always thought that maybe I was making it up, but when she said she remembered it too, I kind of had to believe it then. Anyway, I can't remember how old I was, maybe 3 or 4, as my little sister was still a newborn baby at the time. I used to hate going to bed at night. In fact, I hated nighttime in general. I would see things around the house in the shadows mostly. I think they were dogs, or animals at least, and I remember them growling at me if I came too close. I specifically remember one of them under the dining room table, and I ran to my mom screaming. The fear was so strong. One night I was in bed and laying on my left side. I remember clearly as I opened my eyes and I could see the door in the distance. After a while of laying there, I felt what I can only describe as paws begin to walk up my side. Sounds impossible, which I completely agree with, but that's what I felt. And then something sit on my hip bone. I opened my eyes and directly in front of me was a dog. It looked like a long-eared spaniel type dog, and as gross as it sounds, I also remember it opened its mouth and had vomit on its tongue. I remember feeling terrified as I turned away from that and looked up at the thing sitting on my hip. It was a black dog with a thin body and sleek fur, like greyhounds, and it had a pointed face and pointed ears that pointed upwards over its head. Its eyes stood out, but I can't remember any color. I quickly looked to my right, and there was a Jack Russell Terrier type dog there that started growling when it knew I could see it. I remember being frozen in fear as I looked up at the black dog and watched its head turn slowly and then suddenly snap to look at me. At that point, I somehow got out of bed and ran to the top of the stairs. I'm pretty sure there was a baby gate there at the time, so I have no idea how I got past it, but I remember looking back into my room and seeing all 3 dogs turn to look at me before beginning to run towards me. I got downstairs and burst into the living room where my parents and baby sister were. The dogs didn't follow me as far as I knew, and I remember my mom asking me what I was doing. I very clearly remember saying I wanted to see my sister. No idea why I didn't tell them what just happened, but my mom didn't say anything else or make me go back to bed. She just let me lay on her sofa with her and hold the baby. I never had another experience like that after, but I was absolutely terrified of dogs from that day until I was about 9 or 10. Like I said, my mom remembers me coming into the living room and saying about the dream a while later. I've often spoken about it when the paranormal comes up, but never tried to look into it until recently. I can't find anything that really matches my experience, and I can't find any history on the house I used to live, which is a shame, but after we moved houses, I never saw any shadow dogs again. It was an interesting experience all the same, so I thought I'd share. But if anyone has had any experiences with anything like this, I'd love to hear about it. That's going to be all the stories we have for you tonight, and if you want to share with us your own personal experiences, either paranormal, scary, unusual, or unexplainable, our email is always open. With that said, thank you all for listening in, and we'll see you all in the next episode.